Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Again, I start with the name of Allah, and peace and blessings be to his slave servant and messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ibn Abdullah. And again, the messenger is not as important as the message. And so those of you who know me personally know who I am from voice, and those of you who don't even have to worry. It doesn't matter who I am anyway. The message is what is more important. And in this case, this message is about a question that a friend of mine asked on social media, and it brought up a very good point. Subsequently, the same social media friend of mine asked another question, which also brought up a very good point. And that is this. First question, well, I'll start with the second question. The second question was regarding why it was that a popular singer who is married a Muslim is expecting a child, and there has not been much congratulation for her, whereas other singers have popped up pregnant with no marriage, and they get all this outpouring of congratulations. And there is a reason for it, and I don't mind saying what that reason is. And this is related to the first question that was asked, which is why is it that there are Muslims who claim to be on the Sunnah the most, and maybe even make the most effort to be on the Sunnah and to practice the Sunnah, and yet these Muslims are the ones who these are the ones who are oftentimes the worst, the most harsh to other people. To Muslims and to non-Muslims alike, they're usually the harshest. And I would say this. I understand the reason for that. I mean, I know why it is that I know one reason at least that this happens. I know one reason for this phenomena. And I don't agree with people acting this way and in talking about being on the Sunnah. I'm simply saying that I know where some of this comes from. Some of this comes from an overreaction. Because right now we have to understand that we Muslims are not merely living in immoral times. We are living in anti-moral times. We are living in times right now where because people are in such a hurry to not be judgmental, even about things that may be correct, everybody's in such a hurry to cast aside moral restraints to their behavior that they have taken on a very anti-moral stance to the question of morality. Is something right or is it wrong? Well, oftentimes we decide, hey, look, it doesn't matter. And as a matter of fact, if something is right, we decide we don't want to hear why it's right, because right is not always comfortable. Now, there are times when it's very comfortable to be right, but we tend to think short term because we're human, and thus we fail to realize that while we cannot, as an example, we are not allowed to drink. This means that somebody else is not allowed to drink. So therefore, if people obey this rule, then your children have a much lower chance of being killed or injured in a drunk driving accident. The more people who follow this rule, the less likely your children are to experience this, or you, or anyone else, because the more people who follow it, the less likely others and your children are to engage in drinking. The less likely you are to engage in drinking and then driving with your kids with you. And so we fail to understand oftentimes that moral restraints are for our good. Many human beings, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, fail to understand this. But see, the Muslims are supposed to be different, and right now we are besieged much more from one corner than what we think. We feel like we are besieged by the extremists who are too strict, who have no mercy, who are claiming the Sunnah, and they're oftentimes very harsh against those who don't claim, or they claim do not claim the Sunnah. And they can be. Sometimes they are diplomatic in their advice, and other times they're very harsh, but they still have to advise Muslims they see not doing right. And we feel like we're under attack from them. But what we fail to understand is that we Muslims are actually more so under attack from the liberal corner that wants to throw away Islam until there really is no Islam. And being Islam it becomes like what being Jewish is today. It's just a heritage that you celebrate. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, well, I'll bring some gulab jamun over to your house. And that's what it becomes. It becomes something other than what it was meant to be. The most revolutionary of all revelations. And the most revelationary of all revolutions. Islam is where revelation and revolution meet. It is the revelation of the ultimate revolution. And it is the ultimate revelation. This is about how you live now in this life so that you can live forever in the next life, instead of neither living nor dying. And this is what we don't understand. Many of us come from this liberal tradition, and we say stupid things like, well, who am I to judge this, that, and the other? Well, it depends. I mean, who are you to judge? Well, if you don't know about a situation, you're not required to judge it. You're not required to go looking for bad things in order to burden yourself. But when things are done wrong out in the open, we have to judge them. I'm sorry, but we do. And we live in an anti-moral society where immorality is pushed out into the open and morality has to be kept covered. And therefore, since we're in this sort of situation, many people are going to do things that are wrong, and they're going to do them openly and proudly, and therefore they will require us to judge. We must judge that which is open and obvious. We Muslims are not like other groups. We're not supposed to be. And they say, well, who am I to judge? Yeah, you're right. Who are you to judge? Good question. But for us, we don't ask that question, who am I to judge? Unless we actually understand what the possible answers are and what their conditions are. Who are we to judge? Well, are we witnesses in a case? Are we actual judges appointed over a case? Are we the defendants? Are we the plaintiffs? Who are we to judge? Well, I mean, dang, come on. When somebody actually does wrong, who are you to judge? You judge based on what's obvious, based on what's known, and you don't apologize for it. You don't owe an apology for it. Somebody does wrong and they don't hide it from you. Well, hey, look, they did wrong openly. Why apologize? Now, some people become very harsh because they are reacting, overreacting, but they are reacting to this other onslaught, and that is this liberal, weak-wristed Wislam that's being promoted by so many people. There are things about this life now that can cause people to lose their religion, and they may know it or they may not. There are some things that do not require an excuse of ignorance before you make takfir on somebody. Urinating on a Quran while knowing that it is a Quran, as an example. If somebody knows that a book is a copy of the Quran, he's not to urinate on it. He's not to disrespect that book. Therefore, if somebody knows this and they do it, there's no excuse of ignorance. And I'm talking about, I'm repeating what a sheikh taught his class, and I heard the lesson. I heard this sheikh teaching his class, so this is what I'm repeating. If someone thought that it was an Encyclopedia Britannica and he urinated on it, then there's an excuse of ignorance that you have to apply before we can say that this person is a disbeliever. Magic does not require the excuse of ignorance. If you catch someone doing magic, that's a kafir. Now the punishment depends on it being a Sharia jurisdiction. You catch somebody in Connecticut practicing magic and they called themselves a Muslim before, you're not required to go out and execute this person. But what I do want you to understand, I do want you to realize that if you catch them practicing magic, and that is a sure thing, you are sure that that's what they're doing, practicing magic, well then doggone, you don't have to make excuses for them. That's a kafir right off the bat. They shouldn't be practicing magic. There are certain acts that can nullify one's religion. And of these acts, there are some that require the excuse of ignorance until you have made sure they don't have it anymore. And there are others that don't require the excuse of ignorance. If you catch them, they're disbelievers. There are acts like this. We need to understand that there are conditions to remain a Muslim once you say that you are a Muslim and you claim it. Once someone becomes a Muslim, there are things that we must do in order to remain Muslim. And it's not that difficult in theory and in definition, but we're living in a time and a context that has been engineered so that it would be difficult in order to remain Muslim. So it's more important that we know these things than it was during the time of the Khilafah. We must know these things more now than before. Sorry about that. Air conditioning came on. So it is required that we know these things, because if we don't learn them, we won't know them. And we will assume that we are on the right path simply because one day we said La ilaha illallah and that's it. Not praying. Now some people pray late, but to outright just not pray is leaving the faith. Some people they've said that they're Muslim, they took the Shahada before, but now they just don't pray. That's it, they're just not going to pray. And they're going to leave their religion behind. Now when this happens, come on, it's a wrap. Not going to pray at all. So people praying late, when people pray late, they're not kuffar per se. But then there are people that just don't pray. Well, yeah, they gave up their religion. And we don't owe anybody an apology because we point this out. They gave up their religion, they gave it up. You tell them, and if they still don't want to pray, but hey, that's a kafir. It doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what I feel, these are already the rules. They're different things. Making jokes about the hijab or any other part of Islam, especially those that were clearly revealed, these things can make the doer or the speaker a kafir, a disbeliever. We don't owe an apology for this either. More than that, even worse than that, trying to legislate but other than what Allah has revealed makes the doer a kafir. There's no apology for saying this either. The scholars knew by necessity back during the time of the Khilafah that to dismantle the Sharia, all or in part, meant disbelief. To rule by other than what Allah has revealed. So this being said, there are many things these are things I want y'all to study. I'm just giving examples. I don't want people taking my word for this because they heard it. Study it yourself and see. What I want is for us to understand that these things do exist. And so those who study these things turn around and they see that most of us Muslims now are so lackadaisical and so liberal, we've cast aside all of these conditions. And since we've cast aside all of these conditions, well, come on, what does that tell you about us? We don't want to be Muslim, many of us, when we really get down to it. And so if you are a Muslim and you've learned these things and you see that most people are not practicing these things, you will get upset somewhat, especially when they turn and fight you. So we have to understand that if somebody tells us something about Islam that we may not have wanted to hear, didn't want to know, this doesn't mean we need to turn around and start fighting this person. Because if we turn around and we fight them, then they're going to turn around and they're going to become hostile. They're going to see, okay, well, people are militant against the truth. So they're going to become militant against us. So some of that is actually our fault. This is something we got to realize and understand. Blame ourselves for that which we have actually done wrong. And this is one of these things. It's not the ones who were stern or the ones who were serious about their religion, I should say. I don't want to say stern, but the ones who were serious about their religion are not always the ones who start off being aggressive. Oftentimes it's us. Because they can tell us this is a hadith, it has been checked out as sound, this is what it says, and we still want to fight them with an opinion. Well then, if you think about it, if you're in their shoes, and you know you have studied something and you found it to be true, and you try to tell somebody else, and they still want to fight you with an opinion, you're going to become militant against them. Think about it like this. If a Klansman sits up and starts talking about how, well, it's a part of Christianity to be white supremacist. The Klansman starts saying this, and you start to point out to him how in the Bible, actually you can use the Bible to beat down white supremacy, and you can. You tell him this, and he starts interrupting you and fighting you with his opinion. An opinion while you're sitting there saying to him, well, these scriptures actually point out, especially in the New Testament, point to the equality of people with regard to their origin. They have to distinguish themselves by other things. And he wants to beat you with an opinion. You're going to be militant against him because he got militant against you when he didn't have a leg to stand on. That's what it's like. That's what a lot of the serious Muslims are going through. Because as I said, we're not just living in an amoral time, we're living in an anti-moral time. And we the Muslims have been caught up in the foolishness. So this is partially our fault. And this is part of why it is that there was some debating going on when this same brother asked the question why it is that when a popular singer who has married a Muslim, and some say has taken her shahada, and others have said has not taken a shahada, I don't know, winds up about to have a baby, and you've got other singers that twerk and do all this other stuff and have kids with or without being married, people don't show as much congratulations. They don't sound off as much congratulations. Look, bottom line, it's the same reason that people are jumping on Aisha Curry, Stephen Curry's wife. It's the same reason they're jumping on her, because you know what, she is modest. She doesn't want to just wear any and everything out in public. And so then they want to turn around and make fun of her, like she's wrong, and all these thoughts and these so-called sluts, self-called sluts, are right. I mean, think about it. What's that lady's name? Amber Rose. Amber Rose had the nerve to have a slut walk. Come on now. She's saying, who are men to judge what we do? Well, let's talk about what sluts do so that we'll understand. Amber Rose doesn't have to come out and say, I support the right of women to have children with one man and then pass the child off as another man's baby. She doesn't have to come out and say that. Indirectly, that's what she's supporting. And she supports the rights of wives and husbands to cheat and not lose their marriage while they're cheating. Then doggone it, she supports the right of women to pass off one man's baby, a boyfriend's baby, as a husband's baby. She's supporting that right. And let's be honest, if a slut is cheating on one man with another man, the studies have already shown that women who cheat are more likely to wind up pregnant for the boyfriend than they are to wind up pregnant for the husband. And they're more likely to try to pass the baby off as belonging to the husband than they are to come clean and say, this is not your baby, it's my boyfriend's baby. So this is why it is that on Judgment Day, Allah's going to call people out by their mother's names. This is one of the reasons. And as a punishment for women who pass a baby off as belonging to a father that's not actually the father of that baby, so that this man will raise them. There's a punishment for that. When sluts give in to their lowest instincts and become sluts, this is one of the things they do. Amber Rose was not merely walking in support and leading a march in support of women's sexual liberation, because even in their own religion, neither men nor women are sexually liberated until they're married. The reason that she was leading this march was in support of women's rights to be sexually liberated with or without a marriage, unconditionally, and face no consequences for it, whether or not Amber Rose knew this was what she was standing for or not. We Muslims, we trust in Allah's judgment, so we don't have to sit up and make these kinds of excuses. We don't have to deal, if we follow the rules, we don't have to deal with these problems. And this is where we fail to understand that we don't need to apologize for what Allah has revealed to us. We don't owe any apologies for it. Allah revealed the rules, the do's and the do nots. We owe no apologies. That's it. He's right. If our opinions disagree, then our opinions are the ones that are wrong. Allah is still correct. This being said, the other reason that one got congratulations and the other one didn't, it has to do also with Muslims. And Muslims suffer from subconscious celebrity worship. SCW. The kuffar have celebrity worship, and it is subconscious as well. But they don't have as much of an inoculation against it. We are the Muslims, and we are suffering from this because we're very liberal. We've fallen victim to the not just amoral but anti-moral society in which we live. Well, you know what? Now these Muslims are starting to somewhat worship celebrities as well. And that's why maybe when you have a Muslim that is anonymous and he's poor and he's broke, he comes to the masjid and he says, I just need help paying the rent this month. He doesn't get much support. And ironically, we're better about this than some of the disbelievers, but he won't get the same support that you take a brother like Amir Suleiman, the poet. And if he comes out and he says, we're opening up a school in Africa to curb extremism. Okay, I need your support. Okay, well, that's a noble cause if they're actually trying to curb extremism. If that's what they're trying to do. The problem is we don't even know how to define extremism. The opposite of what we think of as being extreme is also extreme. Extremely liberal is also extreme. Now, if the school is going to be extremely liberal, then it is not curbing extremism, it is promoting extremism. But without thinking about any of these things, we would say this is Amir Suleiman. He's a poet and that man is talented. Now, I'm not knocking him. What I'm saying is that the bottom line is that because he is a celebrity, he can go to a masjid and get what he asked for. I'm also pointing out that if you take non-Muslim celebrities, it's like we will look at them and be in awe, in a type of awe that should be reserved for companions, prophets, alayhum salam. A type of awe that should be reserved for them. Not to mention the awe and the worship that should only be reserved for Allah. These are the reasons why. The answers to both questions are a reflection of the times that we live in. And most of the time, it is not simply because we got a few nut jobs running around that are too extreme in one direction, and that's what Fox News wants to show you, but because there are many more of us who are extreme in the opposite direction, and they're the ones who get praised by anybody and everybody. Some of you were so happy about Sadiq Khan winning the mayoral race in London. Get the F out of here with that mess. If that was real power, he would not have been in the election. It simply would not have happened. If that was going to be a relief to the Muslim Ummah everywhere, he'd have been shot as soon as he won, or he would have never been allowed to make it that far into the final runoffs. We don't understand what we're dealing with. And when some people do understand some things that we're dealing with, when they become partially awake and they see that everybody else is intent on remaining asleep, then they overreact and they may become too harsh. But we have to stop and think, well, in our extreme liberalism, what the hell did we do to cause this overreaction? What part do we play in provoking this overreaction of theirs? Because in the final run, if they're too extreme in one direction and we're too extreme in the other, we both wind up burning. And this is not something that I want for anybody. I hope that this message has been of benefit. Assalamu alaikum.